Hey guys, this is Color from Logic Gaming.
Okay, I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and this time my guest is Alchemist, who is... It's very difficult to nail your role down, okay? So I will just initially start by saying a Counter-Strike veteran, because actually that's where my first question is going to start.
Okay.
I remember the early CPLs in Dallas, so the big majors initially in Counter-Strike were these CPL Summer, CPL Winter, that were held in Dallas, Texas, by, obviously, the CPL. And at the time, there wasn't much media coverage. There wasn't really people filming players as they were playing. There wasn't people even doing interviews. I know, because when I first went and did interviews, they showed me the press area and it was an empty table and I was the only one there. So there wasn't media around the events back then. So that's actually what I want to know is I know you were there for some of the really early ones, but did you go to CPLs before that where you were just a player or something? I mean, you come from the Texas area, right?
No, I'm from St. Louis.
Okay.
About 10 hours away for driving.
So which was your first event then?
CPL Winter 2001.
Okay, so this was the first really big one, you know, the one NIP won over X3. But this
Correct.
one, did you just attend this one as just a BYOC participant or something?
Yeah, just went with the BYOC. We just cruised. The thing is, I didn't even know the guys that I went with. They just needed an extra roommate. I had some vacation time. They played in a local server, and I said, all right, yeah, I'll go down.
Okay.
Why not? So it was kind of a spur of the moment thing. I didn't even know what the CPL was. I knew who some of the big teams were, but I didn't know, CPL. I knew who X3 and DOP was.
Yeah.
So we just went down, and to see Counter-Strike at that level at the first time was amazing, because I thought I was good at Counter-Strike.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I was like 25 at the time. And we played in different leagues, and I was in the, top 10 in OGL, which was, a shitty league, but I thought I was good. And then all of a sudden you just join the pub servers in the BYOC and you're just getting your ass kicked left and right. And you start watching the matches, and then I was like, holy shit, I got to show this to more people.
Okay, so that obviously leads into the fact that I think it was actually the very next CPL that you did the first videos, right? Summer 2002, wasn't that the one where the first AVP, MFAVP appeared?
Well, Mark and John filmed a little bit of 2001, so we have some video footage, but it was just like home movie footage. For 2002, we actually played in the CPL, got our asses kicked. But then when Mark and John started filming a little bit, and I'd like, oh, go film this team, or hey, try to talk to this player, film this match. And then afterwards they went home, and then I got them game footage to use to match up with what they had. And they put that out after the CPL. Okay.
But that's the key thing. I mean, I kind of set it up there where I said that, when I was there as media, it was actually very rare that even we'd gone, or that there was anyone from outside of the local area was going to these tournaments. In fact, at the time in North America especially, a lot of the players even who played in those early CPLs, they lived in the Dallas area, or they just, were willing to drive in a minibus 7 hours from somewhere. So when you did these first events then, and you started to produce interviews and some little pieces of footage, I remember back then, this is one of the reasons I was curious what your origin was, that I watched some of those interviews, and clearly the guy doing the interview, because it wasn't Scoots at the time, it wasn't Midway, it was this other guy, I forget his name.
It was John.
Okay.
Those the guys that I went down was Mark and John, a set of twins, and Mike Allen.
But I remember at the time, as someone who even back then was like pretty hardcore into the game, it was quite clear that he was like a Counter-Strike player. He was more of a casual person. He wasn't someone who was up to date on all the players necessarily. Is this accurate?
Yeah, he didn't really pay close attention. A lot of times I would ask him the questions, and then he would ask the questions. So it was kind of like relayed, because I didn't want to be on camera. I thought I was the old guy. It's like, oh, let's have the younger guy get on camera. So that's why I did it that way.
Okay, but here's the key thing is at the time, for people to understand the context, there wasn't a stream back then. You used to have to actually connect to watch games through the game client. And so it's true, a lot of people didn't have great internet connections, and by the way, there was obviously no YouTube, so it's not as though these things got to like everyone who watched Counter-Strike.
No.
But definitely, if you followed the big websites, you know, these videos were around, and it was something to watch. You know, in the early days, even like I'm saying here, this guy didn't know that much about the players, but compared to nothing, this was still a breakthrough. You know, to have someone at least doing interviews and recording footage. What was the initial plan for what you thought it could become before it evolved beyond that?
Initially, we kind of broke off those 4 guys that all went down together. I was concentrating on playing. Mark and John wanted to film because Angel said, "Hey, could you guys do 1 video a day and put it up on our site?" And they were like, "Yes, we'll do that." And I'm like, "I'm going to go play in the tournament." And then Mike Allen started running the Counter-Strike tournament. So it's kind of funny. It's like the 4 of us kind of were doing different things. Well, of course, we got our first round. So back then, the teams, those tournaments were like 130 teams.
Yeah.
And we played against all the guys that got kicked out of X3. That was who we played against. So we lost 13-11. And then I had nothing to do. And Mark and John were like, "Hey, we're at day 1 and we're already out of ideas." So I just started running around with them. And we're like, "Hey, let's grab these guys. Let's grab these guys. Oh, hey, let's grab these guys from Zex." Because like 3D wouldn't talk to us. So let's talk to these guys from Zex. And I talked with Volcano, and they were like really shy, Shagwire and them. It was actually funny until we interviewed SirScoots. We hadn't interviewed anyone that had any personality. Everybody was really shy. Nobody wanted to look at the camera. I would have to repeat the question 2 or 3 times. And it wasn't like I was asking them about their personal life. I was asking them, "Hey, you know, are you guys planning on running this type of strat on this map? Whatever. Or have you guys watched many of the European teams?" Because I used to watch lots and lots of demos back then. So... yeah, that was it. There was no big plan. It just started blowing up of, "Hey, let's do 1 video a day." And then the next year where we went down there, I think we started doing 2 videos a day.
Okay. And were you always the production guy? Were you the one actually putting the video together and producing the end product?
I was pretty much the guy running around coming up with interview questions, who to interview, and then so back then, because there wasn't really digital, so you would film to tape.
Yeah.
So if you had a minute of footage, it would take a minute to transfer it. So like we'd go out and film for 6 minutes and then run back, give it to Mark or John, and they would try to kind of splice it together, and then we would all get together and then we'd kind of make our story from there. As it went on during matches, I would sit down and live observe to tape because getting demos was hell. You couldn't get demos. So I would live observe to tape, and then we would put everything together. Then we'd get with a player, interview them, and put them all together. I think that was like by 2003.
Yeah. So obviously the leap up from event to event was big, because I remember the famous one, CPL Winter 2002, was the one that Team 3D won the tournament.
Yes.
And this is the one where not only did you have the videos day to day, but obviously after the event was Electronic Warfare, this movie that people can probably go now and watch on YouTube, was produced where it was essentially a mixture of a frag movie and, you know, out of game footage and different aspects in this respect. So what was the jump up from one tournament to the other at that point in time?
On that, Mark and John actually had like a semester off from school because they were still in college, and I was working a full-time job then. So I would come to their house every evening, see what they put together, and I would buy hard drives. And because I mean, a 40 gig hard drive was like $200 back then.
Yeah.
And this video was just getting huge. So I was constantly buying stuff and bringing it there. And, you know, when I think about that movie, it's not a frag movie as much as it was like the moments that made the crowd go crazy. You know, because in the BYOC, everybody would sit and watch HLTV. and they'd watch it. And so a lot of the moments like, oh, that's not that flashy. That's not that cool. But the anticipation and the build up and the reaction of the crowd, that's kind of the moments we were capturing for that video. And sometimes it doesn't really relate, especially in time. And now it's not a big deal on some of those frags, but at the time they were important.
So when it came to the 2003, the next year, like this is where generally media in general was bumping up. I mean, GotFrag was fully up and running by that point in time. They had more Europeans coming over. You got in general more press attention. I remember for the MFAVP productions, this is where it looked like the production level really went up a level. And now there was a lot more videos. And wasn't it something like you did some sort of partnership with GotFrag, right? Because Midway was suddenly the one doing interviews and Scoots was doing them. What happened at that point?
I'm trying to remember. God, I know we did one CPL with Scoots doing interviews and such. Then after that, TSN was TSN, which was a radio broadcasting. Okay. Yes. So we actually partnered with TSN first because GotFrag was banned from the CPL. So we partnered with TSN first just to get somebody with a little bit more on-camera personality. And I started. So
you had Warwich, for example. Was
we had Warwich doing those. So I would write all those interviews, but he would just read them, and then I would help TSN during their broadcast because they didn't know who any of the teams were. Yeah, and so in the off season, I was actually head of anti-cheat for Cal, which was the CPL's online league. And I was doing lots of stuff with Cal. For the CPLs, I would seed the tournament. CPL would give me their rules of seeding, and I would seed all 100 and something teams. So I knew everybody. And since I still played, I still knew a lot of the Midwest teams, which mostly those, Team 100 was a Midwest team. Yeah. So yeah, we started working with TSN, and then I actually started broadcasting with TSN. I started doing color commentary, and then I think I submitted an article to GotFrag called "The Art of the Scrim," which basically is just about how to scrim correctly, which people still need to read today because they don't fucking know. So they just started working with GotFrag and just getting them involved. And it kind of like freed up bandwidth for me because I knew all the teams and I knew all the players, but to get somebody else to come up with some of the interview questions or to, oh yeah, I watched that match, we can talk about this round instead of this round. It just kind of freed me up a little bit. And the main reason to start working with GotFrag, though, was we needed a host. Because our videos, once again, no YouTube. Yeah. Our videos sat on a CPL site that was hosted by Netfire that became Game Demons. Angel was pissing off all these people anyway. So our videos would go away. And then so nobody could watch our videos. So they'd have to be on File Planet and stuff like that. So that was one of the main things. It's like, hey, we want to work with you guys, but we want you to host our videos.
So obviously a lifelong friend and someone you got to know around this time was Scoots.
Yes.
Like, what was Scoots' involvement? When did he start doing some of the interviews? Like, had you actually known him beforehand? Is this the start of your involvement with him?
I had played UGP in Cal and scrimmed against them a few times, and we got along pretty well. Just the normal, like, you would shit talk each other, but it wasn't vicious. It was like we had fun. Then I met Scoots. We interviewed him that winter 2002 CPL, and like I said, he was the best interview. We joked around a lot during that tournament. So when it came time to do the next one, we're like, we got to have somebody with more personality than John. Everybody kept calling John the robot. He's an engineer.
Sure.
So he's 100% an engineer. So why we had him do it, I don't know. Because he lost the bet or something. So we started having Scoots do the interviews, and he could bring out so much more from the players. He can make them relax. He would ask like 3 questions in one sentence sometimes. Because one thing about Scoots is when he gets nervous, he talks more, which most people shut up, but he talks more. So yeah, we just started having him do that. And then me and Scoots would film all day and stuff, and we'd go get a drink at the bar. And it's kind of funny, in 2003, me and Scoots basically dreamed up GotFragTV and how it would work then.
But before you had any kind of vehicle to actually do it.
Exactly. We pretty much of how the observing needs to work, how the broadcast needs to work, how we'd use the cameras, things that we could do to the game to make the game look better. We kind of pretty much came up with that in the bar, and it took us years to actually do it.
So, okay, you alluded already to TSN, and basically at the time, TSN were the people who they did the shoutcasting, and it was shoutcasting back then. People used to have to open Winamp and sync it up with the game that would be on through the client, so HLTV, the equivalent of GoTV essentially, and they would just watch the game. And as you kind of alluded to before about the fact that even though they had the casters, etc., the casters at the time, they would just cast, NA matches. So they wouldn't necessarily know who Mouse Sports is, or who, some Swedish player is if he's never been to the CPL. So that middle period, there was still like some growing pains I could still tell there, because a lot of the guys from TSN at that time, they were all just people who were trying to do that American radio voice. Welcome to the game. It was all just that guy, but like 15 versions of him, and a bunch of them nice guys, and they had some passion for the game, but they never were trying to go deep. Like there wasn't any like Yanko with the game or anything at that level at the time.
No. In fact, the only person that could do things at that level was Midway. I understood the game at that level, but I've never been good at getting that information out in a nice short soundbite. If you give me an hour to make a video, I can do that. But if you want me to sit there and explain why that's why one of the reasons I stopped doing broadcasting. I started producing their shows because I knew all the information. I just wasn't as slick.
So as we pointed out already, in MFAVP, there were these other 2 guys who, basically that's like their story continues a little bit, but essentially that's the end of the chapter that they're in. And now this is the question. Okay, so you move into some of the production stuff. You've already mentioned years before you dreamed up with Scoots what GotFragTV would be like. Like at this point in time, that's basically when you become the producer, right? Because one thing I remember, okay, to set the context for people, is that back then, HLTV as a spectator client was incredibly limited compared to GoTV. Like a feature in GoTV that is 10 times better is the fact that you can press numbers and go to a person's POV. Now, this is one of the key things that GotFragTV attempted to kind of fix, which was even if you're the observer, you have to manually, in whatever order it's in, cycle through point of view. So sometimes if there's a 2v1, to get to the 1, you might have to cycle 2 times, and then to go back to the other one, maybe that's 1, or is it 2 more? And it becomes very complicated. Whereas obviously I remember one of the first things that you tried to do with GotFragTV was, we're just going to record separately all 10 POVs. And then, that's where the producer comes in. He mixes it, he decides what we watch, and actually he's the observer to a degree. What can you tell me about that aspect?
Well, it was, Mark and John, actually, for our first broadcast for GotFragTV, Mark and John from MFAVP were actually there. They actually ran the switcher and controls for all our live cameras, and then I ran the in-game stuff. And what we did, actually, it was my twin brother John. I have a twin brother as well. Mark and John are twins, and I'm a twin as well. So we would work. We had 5 cameras. So I had an overview map camera. I had my primary observer that I worked, and then my brother would work the other 3. And it was just about storytelling of how is this team starting this attack? How's this attack getting shut down? If 5 players are running towards catwalk, we would show the players leave spawn, go to a wide view of the catwalk, and then I'd go to the guy defending catwalk, because if he's going to kill all 5 of them, I want that. And that was our kind of mode of storytelling. But to do that, it was, all right, I'm going to go on the terrorist that's leading out of spawn. My brother's going to go, all right, get me Rambo. And he's clicking around, getting Rambo on catwalk. And then, hey, move that other camera over there. Then he's moving that other camera. And then then I have a switch that I'm switching live to those different cameras. And that's how we solved that. And it was never perfect. Because if you get into a site where there's like lots of trade frags, you're still stuck on guys elsewhere. But it was way better than what anybody else was doing. A lot of times somebody would die and it would sit on that dead guy, and the casters are just going on and on and on. And you're just looking at the ground. Yeah. And then you'd see somebody in the other bomb site. And then maybe you'd see them click around. We kind of got away from that. So that was pretty much our big. And then we also had replays. Nobody else had replays until that time. And I recall there was a TV company in Germany who was like, how are you guys doing that? And we're like, can't tell you.
Okay, but that's the thing. One of the ways that you were doing a lot of these things, and one of the reasons why other people didn't, is because other people had one PC that was on HLTV going through the observer feed. You had this setup where you had multiple PCs and you had some of the hardware and all these things. At the time, this was like a revolutionary approach, right?
Right. Well, we used, everybody, almost all small, not even small, a lot of the big companies use like new tech video toaster systems for switching. And we used 2 of them because I think the max inputs were 5 or 6 or something like that. So we used 2 of them. One that was owned by the MFAVP and one that was owned by GotFrag. And that's how we were able to do all that. A lot of people were using like 2. And they weren't using them correctly because they weren't telling a story. They were just clicking around.
Yeah. So this is going to be one of the weirdest parts of the story to explain to people who weren't there, and people even who followed the end of 1.6, is that what we're describing here, like what years was GotFragTV really doing this? It was sort of like 2005 type of era, right?
Yeah, we were ready in 2005, but we couldn't do it until winter 2006 because the WSVG TSN partnership.
But the bizarre element is that some of the things you did here, people will now recognize from modern day CSGO and how it's done. But what is really strange about this story is that a lot of those elements actually went away after GotFragTV. The game regressed in terms of how observing and how producing was done. It went back to being, sometimes a producer who's producing a whole event, other games as well as this, and then one guy separating the whole thing. And by the way, no one even knew who the observer was in some of those tournaments. You were at the mercy of whoever it was, sometimes just a random guy. And so it actually wasn't until CSGO that we built a lot of this stuff up. So I want to kind of focus in on some of that stuff because it was so early on. So one aspect that you mentioned, which I know is something that you're very passionate about, is that aspect where you said, like, okay, so you, in our minds, you were setting up as if it was a terrorist round on Dust 2, and they come out of the spawn and someone's running up to the catwalk. In fact, 3 of them are running up to the catwalk, and obviously the CT on 1.6 usually play pretty back on the catwalk. He wouldn't go right up to the corner. He'd play at the sort of angle where the stairs are. Now, if we imagine that in our minds, as you said, you wouldn't just sit on the guy who's the CT. You wouldn't just sit on the terrorist.
Boring.
You would make a third person point of view. And now this is a key distinction to make because a lot of people in tournaments before and since have tried a third person perspective. And whenever I see it normally, it's like I've been tasered because I'm like, get away from that. Get away, go to the player view. Because most people don't know what they're doing. So they're just going to miss the kills. They're going to fuck the whole thing up thinking they're being, cinematic. So what was the thinking here and what was the specific way you tried to apply it to make it work?
I was trying to apply the way I saw the game to let the viewer see it. I think people make the mistake of saying, oh, this is how a professional sees the game, I'm going to show it this way, or this is how a player sees the game, this is how I see it this way, or this is how a casual sees it, we'll do it for the casual. And it's kind of a mix of all of them. I'm trying to tell a story. I want at the end of the round for you to say, oh, this attack came from here, this is where it failed, and this is why. And that is my whole goal. It's not so much cinematic to show all these guys running down catwalk, but if I show that angle, oh, it's 3. There's 3 that's coming this way. Now I can go to the last guy in the line, but you still might not see all three. We didn't have X-ray back then either. So, I mean, that's just pretty much at the end of the round, I want to know what's going on. I want the viewer to be educated. I want them to be entertained as well, but I want them to be like, that's what happened.
Because the key element
this guy killed this guy, this guy killed this guy, this guy killed this guy. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, that's the key point, is that you explicitly were not trying to just capture every kill. Because, I mean, this is a topic that came up recently where people were, like, praising this ESL UK broadcast that caught every kill in a round because they just used the delay and knew it was coming. Now, when I watched that, it was a train wreck. Like, even just to see all the kills didn't really help, you know? So what was the philosophy there? Were you willing to, like, give up some kills to if it benefits the story or something, right?
Every time. And that's the first thing I tell every observer that I ever work with is story first. Tension, drama. That's important. Think of one of my examples I use a lot is Mirage. You have a CT. You got a T hiding in mid, and you got a CT on the other side of the wall, and you got another T working his way up an apartment. The rest of the team's all spread out. It doesn't matter which kill happens. But which one did you start on? If you started with this T in the middle and you build up this tension of these two people are on the other side of the wall from each other, at any moment, they're going to come out and fight. If you quickly switch away and go to that T that's coming apartment, well, you've ruined that tension and you've ruined the story you've built up as if you're a player. And you know something the player doesn't know. Of, oh shit, this is going to happen. If the bomb's going to apartments, well, you got to get away from that story. If the broadcasters are going on and on about the guy at apartments, you got to go to the apartments. But ideally, you want to keep that tension in that story because it's going to be a 1v1 and a 1v1. So that's just like the philosophy there. If it's like 4 people on a full execute, you got to show that execute. Who gives a shit about the one? You have to accept you're going to miss kills. That's, you know, you shouldn't miss the important kills, but you're going to. When you have somebody picking a site, 2 sites at the exact same time, you're going to miss a kill. Yeah.
Because an important element, I think, to this is I often give the example, I'm sure you're very familiar with it, of how they made poker become televised.
Yes.
And if everyone remembers, the real secret to why poker had a boom wasn't that poker's a brilliant game and that there was online poker. The genius concept was this guy who invented the whole card cam. And what that meant was, this is why I use it as an analogy. If you imagine the old days, because I've seen some of the 90s poker tournaments where you just see what the player sees. You see a load of guys with their cards down. You don't know what cards they've got. You see them making bets, and, you know, maybe the commentator could do a great job and tell you, oh, I think maybe he's, you know, trying to get three of a kind or something, you know, but that's about it. And then basically the only entertainment can come from the outcome. Like if this guy, oh, he actually did win and he did have what he said. That's the only entertainment comes from the end result. Whereas the key with the whole card cam was you can even have a hand that just gets folded on the turn and you never see the completion of it. But all the drama and the tension is like, you know what that guy has and you know what the other guy has, which the original person doesn't know. And then how do you tell that story? And then when do you show, like, you notice sometimes they don't show you that one of the guy's hands until they've talked a little bit and they've shown another guy who had a good hand, but this other guy's got a better one. When it, you know, like they managed to find a way to make it entertaining no matter what the variables are. And to me, that's the key element, because if we just left it with the old auto director, like they used to have in HLTV, every now and then players are so good, they're going to give us some great rounds. We'll see some great things from time to time, but we can't ensure there's entertainment value just from the frags that happen in a game, right?
Yeah, and, you know, sometimes a frag is like, well, of course he's going to have to get that frag. Who cares? And you know what? You know, when you bring that up, I was actually watching a lot of those poker tournaments back then because I actually haven't had a TV in years, but when I would go to CPL events and when we were working on the seeds or working on pre-show stuff, it would be on all the time on the TV. And there's the concept of that. And then I'm a big hockey fan of, I like going to the games and sitting way up high on one of the ends and watching plays develop. I would say it's those two things, that tension and watching plays develop.
Okay. Okay, that's an interesting thing then, because actually, it's funny. The two sports I always compare Counter-Strike to the most actually is basketball and hockey. I say basketball because it's scoring all the time and you have like set roles a lot more defined, you know. And then hockey to me because hockey's all about coordination between players. Like people who are scrub fans, I always think the reason why hockey wasn't successful as a sport in North America is that you can't just watch the star player, because even the star player doesn't score in every game. Like, you know, he might do some stuff, but it's nuanced. And you notice that even the star player, the whole discussion isn't just, oh my God, the star player's coming in. It's like, what line does he play on and against what line? It's like, it's all about the coordination element. So to me, those two aspects, those two sports represent the different elements of Counter-Strike. How was following other sports? Like, obviously, when you're a producer, you're trying to figure out some of the things in those sports and bring them over to Counter-Strike.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, if Frank Nuccio, which was the director for Counter-Strike, it's the commissioner for Domain of Pain League, and then Domain of Game League, then that became Cal. Yeah. His idea of Counter-Strike was hockey. He was a big hockey fan, and that's why he wanted it 5v5, because back then it was 7v7 and 6v6.
I mean, it makes sense because the Stars were pretty good back then. The Dallas Stars were actually decent at the end of the 2000s. So, okay, I can understand why. Yeah, I can understand why they were okay with that at the time.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I like the nuances of sport. I like take hockey for instance. Yeah, it's when a guy gets shut down. Hockey's like one of those sports where hard work can beat skill. But really good skill can beat all the hard work in the world. And it's that balance of trying to explain, oh, well, he just worked really hard and cut off that angle or took out the stick from him. Yeah. Or this guy actually shut down this lane so he didn't even have a pass. You'll never see that on TV. So being able to move the camera like you can in Counter-Strike to show, I mean, whole rounds come off of flashes. Whole rounds are decided by where a smoke landed. If you're not showing that, you're doing a disservice to the game.
Because, I mean, this is an element that I wanted to talk to you about, because I know anyone who's involved in production, particularly in something like Counter-Strike, where it's a very chaotic esport, and crucially, there is always this present understanding that it is impossible to have the perfect product. You can't get every kill, but at the same time tell the story and show what happened, and then have something left over to show at that point. Even at that point, there'd be no point showing replay sometimes, you know. So one of the key elements I've noticed is it's not that this is a problem in Counter-Strike or in esports. You go and watch any sport, and as we're alluding to here, every sport is imperfect in this respect. Like you're saying in this, no one's going to focus the camera on a guy just shutting down a lane if the puck's over the other side of the ice. And likewise, like the most famous sport to me, like this just shows me how if you do a masterful job showing the game and explaining the basics, people can enjoy the game on a different level, is that the NFL is probably the most popular American sport. And this is a sport that has a massive amount of people on the field at once. And actually, most of what wins you the game is like right in the middle with the defensive players in the trenches, essentially, and then how people cover each other there. And that is the part of the sport that will never be where the camera is focused. They will never be zoomed in on that. And you will never actually know until they show replay or bring it up what actually happened there. Like, you'll just watch the guy who was open or who didn't get the ball. That's like, it's like, so everyone is actually accepting in every sport. This can never be perfect. So we've all got to come up with our philosophy for it, right?
Yeah. And, you know, in football is kind of how the modern rules of Counter-Strike is designed. So Counter-Strike rounds used to be 250. So it used to be 250 a round, and I think it's 250. You probably actually remember better than I do. And then it was like a 5-second freeze time, and then it was go. And me and a couple other people, Midway and one of the guys from TSN, like started proposing all these rule changes. And one of the things that we wanted to do, because GotFrag at the time had they innovated the stat system for Counter-Strike. Yes. And we were able to prove that, hey, look, most people don't even get a kill until after the first minute of the round. we could cut a minute off of this and bring more viewers in. We could increase the freeze time to let teams get a better strategy and to build the tension for the next round. Because I think we started proposing this stuff in like 2002.
Yeah,
and it was.
I mean, obviously, a key element again of context for people is Valve is in no way involved in any of this. This is all third party. No. It's all you guys coming to the tournament organizers, and then if you get something through there, it's through. You know, there's no shadowy cabal you have to contact through smoke signals or whatever it is that people have to do now.
Well, and it's like, you know, we do 15 rounds because I convinced the CPL to switch to 15 rounds. It used to be 12.
Yeah,
and the only reason it's 15 is because there was a money bug, and it helped negate the money bug. And I don't know if we want to spend an hour talking about the old money bug in Counter-Strikes, but we'll do basic. It used to be that if the CTs won a round without killing all the terrorists, they would get no money. And that just created this huge lopsided advantage for the terrorist, where you're trying to hunt down the terrorist, and they would be all stacked in one corner, and they would either win. They would win either way. They would either win the round or they'd win the money battle, and they would win the next 2 or 3 rounds. So that was why
essentially what the best teams eventually learned to do was you play as if it was a real game. Like, you set up for your terrorist strat, you try to, but the point is, if you lose a couple of guys early and you're in that 3v5, you just say, we will definitely save now, and you just run the whole clock down, which obviously that's death for the reviewer. I mean, I remember, and that was even as much as I could, even as much as I could appreciate what they were doing, even I was like, this is terrible.
Exactly. So that's why we switched to that. And then overtime used to be $800, and we switched that to $10K.
Yeah.
So I don't. Was it
actually like exciting to potentially be involved in shaping the sport, as it were, at the time?
Yeah. It was weird because I was on all sides. I was on the side of a player, I was on the side of a spectator, I was doing the broadcasting, and then I was helping with the tournament organizers. I'm probably the only person that's played an event, broadcasted an event, made rulings on exploits during an event, and helped set up the monitors. You know, it's just at that level. I mean, I'm sure local LANs have done it, but it was fun, and it was kind of amazing in some ways that a lot of that started out of, 4 random guys going down to a CPL.
So the involvement with Scoots, I remember a key element was, obviously he got on board with GotFrag.
Mm-hmm.
With GotFragTV, like, eventually it was based in Arizona with Scoots, right? Wasn't it based like in his house or somewhere close by or something?
Yes. In about 2006, MLG was looking to buy GotFrag, and that enabled me to get a full-time job doing that. Because through all this, I was working a full-time job. I was doing all this for free. Actually, free is not the right word. I was paying money to do this.
Yeah.
All the admins were paying money to do this, which would blow people's mind to really think about. That the CPL was not paying for the people that ran their tournaments, hotel rooms, wasn't paying for their trips. All the media, we paid for our own bandwidth sometimes. I mean, so about 2006, I moved out to Arizona, and I was actually living in Scott's house for a while. Eventually got my own apartment a block away. But yeah, we set up out of there. The first thing we did was a fear combat tournament.
Okay. So I know obviously Scoots in his real life work, when he still had it, was involved with like production and behind the scenes of some things, like obviously the Olympics, etc. What was Scoots' role in all of this? Like, how did the two of you, what was the roles divided up, and what did he do?
Scott did, it actually works really well because Scott is very detail oriented. Scott would work on booking our travel. It's kind of even funny. I have a degree in electronics, and well, actually I don't have a degree, but one class away from it. The 90s guys, you didn't have to have a degree to have a job. It was fun. So I went to school for electronics, and my day job was basically dealing with mechanical stuff, electronics, and then doing software stuff as well. But Scoots was really good with the VT system. So he set a lot of that stuff up. My main role was the look of it. I actually hadn't done any video editing until that point. Mark and John did most of it. I just stood behind them and pointed. So I was doing the video editing, doing the in-game directing, where he would direct, like I would produce the show. So I would write the show. He would direct the live cameras. I would direct the game cameras. It was just, a lot of it was just us. He would run the sound. On Twitter the other day, he said he ran the encoder. I ran the encoder, so I don't know what he's talking about. But I mean, we just kind of, he did a lot of the business side as well, and I just did a lot of the making it work, making it look good. Of, hey, let's have this graphic, let's have this video. And Jesuit, who was a writer, was also living there, and he did a lot of our graphic work.
So one of the concerns of this particular era, so we're talking about like 2007, was CGS had launched already, and famously all the 1.6 talent from North America went over to that largely, and then there were still European teams playing 1.6, it still stayed alive there. And so GotFrag was in a weird position because obviously being bought by MLG, that's like a direct competitor of CGS. And so on one hand, you were trying to cover CGS, cover Source, cover CGS, but you're also trying to cover the European stuff and the Counter-Strike tournaments over there. And at this point in time, for people who don't know, 2006 was one of the years where the game really was global. There'd be tournaments in China and Korea. It was everywhere, basically. And so the calendar was huge. So what was this year like, this year or so, when you had like the full-time job and you were working under MLG, but through GotFrag, and in this it's kind of a weird in-the-middle scenario?
Yeah, at first, we were almost trying to pitch ourselves as kind of a white label thing. We had some contacts with Blizzard, doing some stuff for Blizzard. It's actually funny. CGS very first online broadcast was from us. They paid us how to do it because they didn't know how to do it. So the very first CGS online broadcast was through Scoot's house. So we did that. We did some 1v1 tournaments for Intel maybe, or Gigabyte. And it was lots of just trying to come up with ways to do content. We'd do like video contest. We would do a lot of Counter-Strike Source tournaments at the time, unfortunately. I didn't like Counter-Strike Source. It looked weird to me. The models looked too big, and when they jumped and moved, it didn't look right to me.
So was there anything that was kind of, so in that case, was it kind of a bit underwhelming, in as much as you said, because of the whole TSN scenario before, it had held off GotFragTV to this point, but then CGS comes along, MLG, like if you could have done GotFragTV a year earlier, that would have been the real time to blow the doors off, right?
Yeah, if we would have been able to do it when we wanted to, I think it would have changed a lot of. I think CGS would have still came in. They still would have thrown all their money around. And probably ruined everything. So at first, when CGS died, we started doing actually 1.6 events again. We started doing some Code 5s, and we did our own North America events. So those were fun. But we did everything. We did World of Warcraft Arena, which people laugh about that being an esport, but it had more viewers than Counter-Strike and Halo combined. Yeah. And those were the two big esports. I remember, I think it was 2008, we did the first 3v3 tournament. And MLG released this press release about how many viewers they had for the weekend. And internally, we were told that we had 70% of those viewers. So, we just did whatever.
Okay. So when we talk about this era, like 2007 going onwards, like hopefully for viewers who were around then, they'll know it's sort of like the movie Titanic. Like you kind of know where this is going to end. Like there's no way the ship can get safely home, right? We all know that. So here's the problem, Alchemist. If you've just told me that you first of all got your proper full-time job, like end of 2006, well, anyone who remembers the world back then, like hint, hint, the global recession was around 2008. And as I said, MLG and GotFrag kind of parted ways, died, sold off, whatever, you know, a couple of years into this. So what was that like on your end? Like what happened?
We had just done an MLG event, and I had pitched them. We were running a very skeleton crew. I mean, most of it was Scoots and I. Jesuit would come in and help with different bits here and there, but it was just us. And it's like, you know, we would like Midway was in New York, and he was one of our main on-camera guys. And it was, hey, we could do shows every day. So we started pitching. Well, even way back then, we had pitched all these ideas that some of them they end up doing for MLG. But so we wanted to do all these things, and CGS fell apart, and we're like, hey, you know, you got, you know, DJ Wheat's just sitting there. I'll drop my salary, pick up DJ Wheat. We could start doing shows every day. We could do lots of things once we just had two other people. And I go on vacation. I go home for Thanksgiving. And I'm sitting at the airport, and Scoots calls me. He's at MLG Vegas. They're closing us down. They want Scoots and I to move to New York, but they're closing down the studio in Arizona. That was hell. You know, I'd moved across the country. I built this product up. And the choice was to go to New York and just be a worker. Instead of making up what I want to do, I would just be doing whatever they told me to do. And I'd been to New York a bunch of times, and I hate it. I hate all the people. I hate traffic. I hate crowds and lines, and it's not me. So I said no. And Scoots, of course, said no. So did my Thanksgiving at home, lived in Arizona for a couple months, but I would, like, now I know I was depressed. Before, I just was like, oh, I'm just going to play World of Warcraft. Okay. So, like, I'm living a block away from Scoots, and I bet you I visited him twice in like 2 or 3 months. And eventually I just pack up all my stuff and I go back to St. Louis. Now, if I would have stayed, all the EG stuff would have happened. I could have worked on that, and I could have got that Twitch buyout money.
Okay. I assume Scoots has told you that many times, right?
No, but I've told myself that a few times.
Okay. So, in theory, the story would have ended there, Alchemist. That would have been the end. So why?
Go ahead.
Why not?
Well, I went back home, and you know, I had a non-compete with MLG, which I was pretty sure it wasn't going to stand up in a fight, but I didn't really want to fight getting jobs with their competitors. I wasn't interested in StarCraft when that started blowing up. I was just not interested at all. I had applied actually for ESL and Riot, and nobody was interested in picking me up. So eventually,
do you have any theory as to why that is, though? I mean, you had a lot of experience. You'd worked behind the camera, done a lot of different things. They just didn't know who you were?
Yeah. I mean, because like we would go to events, and it's not like I mingle. I mean, do you think of nowadays? I mean, do you see me going out and mingling a lot? No, I don't. I just nod my head, sit in the corner, and I like to people watch. And so it's not like I had this big name, and it's not like I advertised myself. So either they didn't know or they didn't care. I don't know. So I actually went back to work. I worked on giant copier machines, like the giant industrial few million copies a month machines. So I just went back to doing that. They gave me all my raises that I missed while I was gone, gave me a full territory again. Bam, I just went back to doing that.
So, okay, in the meantime then, as I alluded to before when I was talking about the good things that you guys did at GotFragTV and the innovations that you put forwards, the sad part of the story is, like, it'd be one thing if people just forgot about you and they just took all the things you did and they improved it, and then that's why we are where we are now. But actually, like I said, it regressed massively. Like, production went back to being just a random person no one knows clicking through the camera, or if it was on HLTV, you could go on yourself and be the director, and then you had to, it depends how good you are in terms of knowing what you want to watch, you know. But none of the production things were there, and it was many, many years. And while, yeah, I'll give them a little bit of a break in as much as because of the recession, you know, a lot of the money did go out of esports for a while. Did you ever, like, watch some of these tournaments? Did you ever see, like, how kind of bare bones it was?
Yeah, I would say I watched Counter-Strike back then like I watch hockey now, where I would just tune it in, enjoy what I saw, and then just be done. Because if I didn't really enjoy it, I would watch it and be like, oh, they're fucking up this camera. Oh, they're on this guy. They shouldn't be on this guy. And, like, that's how I watch Counter-Strike a lot of the times, is I just start doing the production stuff. It's like, why are they on this guy? Oh, that was a really good shot. And then I'm happy for a little while. So I would watch tournaments here and there. But I wasn't happy with how it was being done. But I didn't sit there and think, oh, I'm going to, maybe I should start bugging these guys on how to do that. It really didn't get to me until CSGO. When CSGO came out, I got into the beta. I was like, hey, this feels better than Source. Not as good as 1.6, but feels better than Source. And then I started watching the show matches they did, and I watched the first major, and I was just angry. I was just like, why are you guys doing this? We've solved this problem already.
So one of the weird things about that is that it wasn't, I mean, people now will know that you did ELEAGUE and you've done a lot of things at the moment, but you only got in fairly recently again. I remember, like, Counter-Strike already started to blow up sort of 2015, and I forget which exact event it was, but I remember there was an event I worked with Scoots where you just came down as like a friend. Like, was it a CEVO? Was it MLG?
Yeah, it was like a CEVO event. I had, about that time, I had spent about 6 months trying to get back into some of the stuff. And I'm sending, like, free ideas. Guys, you should be doing this. You guys should be doing that. And I was sending it to ESL. I was sending it to DreamHack. And MLG started, when they started getting back into Counter-Strike again, I knew a lot of those guys still. So, yeah, it was a CEVO event. I went down there just because I hadn't seen Scoots since, I think that was 2008 is where the last time I saw Scoots. But we talked all the time. So I was like, I'm going to drive up, and I hung out, and I went into the production room. I see Kevin sitting there with one computer, and I'm like, why are you guys doing this? You guys aren't showing any other angles. You guys aren't showing, oh, you got this keybind where you're not using it. So when they started talking about, it's kind of funny. I go to that event, and as soon as I come back from that, ESL sends me a message saying, actually Midway, who works for ESL now, is like, hey, we're going to do a World of Warcraft event. Can you come and help? Okay. So I go to that event, and while I'm at that event, MLG calls me and says, hey, we are bidding for the major, and we're going to do these 3 events. Do you want to come and direct the game cameras? And it's like, sure, but you're going to have to give me this amount of cameras and get me a delay camera so we can have replays. And I don't know if anybody was using that then, but the idea of having a delay observer to get all the replays just did not occur to people. And I was like, you fools. So I started doing the events I think I showed up to another CEVO event just to kind of consult a little bit of what we needed for the major. And then I started doing the game directing for the major. When I got to the second major event, I get a message from ELEAGUE saying, hey, we're told that you can produce Counter-Strike, and we're looking to do Counter-Strike. So that was kind of like, okay. So yeah, it just kind of like all blew up in 1 year.
So was the ELEAGUE part unexpected? Like, did you think you were still finding your feet? Like, did it come out of nowhere?
Yeah, it really, really unexpected. I had asked them, like, why did you guys come to me? And they were like, oh, we talked to 4 different people and they all said to go to you. And it's kind of funny. It's like, wait a minute, none of those people wanted to hire me, but they wanted, okay, that's fine. I'll do it. So yeah. And really, ELEAGUE, when I got there 2 weeks before the first show. So it was quite a task.
So for anyone who's never been in a production room at ELEAGUE, what is different about ELEAGUE from past events you've done?
So most esports events, and probably most events that you see, a producer will write or run a show, and the producer might also be the director. He'll write or run a show, show it to everybody, talk to the graphics team, and if that graphics are not done by the time they're on air, they're not getting done, because that's the same guy that's working the machine. And they just run through the show, and they don't really talk a whole lot. They just pretty much, hey, get me this replay, hey, get me this graphic, and the director talks to the TD. ELEAGUE or Turner, I talk nonstop, and it's up until the last week of the major, I micromanaged all the replays, all the graphics, and we're constantly coming up with new graphics. Like, hey, this guy is 0-7 in his last 2 matches. Let's get the graphic for that. I'm doing the run of show. I'm doing all the commercial segments. That's like a really, I mean, you're 20 minutes to air and somebody comes up and says, hey, we have to do this ad piece. Oh, now I got to rearrange the whole show. And I'm constantly telling the director, graphics on Y, graphics on X. All right, shoot the players for a bit. And so I'm telling the director to set up for the director to then to kind of call the show. And the director will be like, oh, let's pan the camera this way and let's do this sweeping shot. Let's do this graphical effect to that. But I'm just pretty much moving the show along ahead of time. So it's way more involved, and it's I talk to the talent way more. I mean, in the old days, I used to have a sign that I'd hold up and say, hey, wrap it up or move on. Which, I mean, I don't talk to you as much, but Richard, I mean, constantly I'm telling him what's next, what's going on, to delay. I'm coordinating with the admin team when to make the match live so we can kind of be seamless, so we can kind of entertain in the meantime. And then I'll talk to I designed all the observer setup, how it works at ELEAGUE. And then every once in a while I'll say something to them. Hey, your guys are trying to catch too much. Slow down or speed up, one or the other.
One element that must be very different then, and I feel like must be the balancing act for you, is that, like you said, for esports events, the producer is the director. Well, for your events, like, the director is a guy who has won Emmys, but he comes from outside of esports. So on one hand, I mean, you have to kind of give the nod to him to some degree, because he obviously knows the business. But on the other end, you're obviously the guy who knows the game. And so there needs to be some sort of interface there, right, to actually get the best product from both ends across.
Yeah, ELEAGUE and Turner has helped me tell a better story between matches, as far as more graphics, more video, more things to look at, and they've helped me organize how to plan that out. There's so much stuff I have extra video and extra graphics that we never use because I've planned it out. The director is they've gotten really good. Every once in a while they'll leave a game too soon. But other than that, I would say Because I go to a lot of their broadcasts for their baseball and basketball games as well. I'll go to their productions to watch how they do them. So you go to a production meeting on a baseball game and you say, hey, this guy is on a cold streak. Get me footage of the last 4 times he struck out. Hey, graphics, give me a hot or cold graphic for that. And immediately everybody's, bam, they're on it. They're all on the same page. If I said, get me 4 shots of JDM missing, because this is actually something we end up doing. Like, give me 4 shots of JDM missing. Well, from which match, from which screen, which monitor. I actually have to physically get this footage. Then I have to explain to the graphics people what I want. There's just way more details, way more explaining, and they're getting better. I mean, way better than they used to be. I mean, the graphics team especially, they'll sit there, hey, why did they trade this player? Or, hey, why is this team playing so bad? They're fans, but they just don't know it like, we know it.
Is ELEAGUE the best production in Counter-Strike?
Yes.
Why then?
So first thing is, like, Steve Daly directs most of it. He spent more time on his opening camera moves than most events spend practicing, spend testing. And that's just his opening camera moves. We're there 3 hours before the show starts. All the cameras are tested. All the sound is tested. Everything is, we got a different graphics guy today. Hey, let's drill the opening of the show 3 times. In which, you kind of, we're doing this again, but it's like we're trying to drill the whole team and get them all on the same page. Or, hey, we want to change the order of this. Let's run through it like we have it written down, but let's change this. And so we'll do lots of practicing. All the camera people are top notch. It's something I've really noticed at events nowadays when I watch, is just how not smooth a lot of the camera transitions and the camera movements are. When you get a guy that, if he's not good at his job, he's fired immediately, which they've done, you get good camera people. I think we had one show ever start late, and it started 15 seconds late, and it's because we had to reboot the encoder. It's a machine. One of the things they taught me is how to run that machine instead of, oh yeah, we'll just show up and we've had sound packs die on air and nobody ever knows. We've had cameras go down. Nobody ever knows. It's just, there's lots of backups and there's lots of planning and really good execution of the planning. If you change, I'm trying to think of the opening of the major, where VP comes walking in with their glowing shoes. So we had rehearsed the opening every day. Like, so in the morning and the evenings before everything, we would rehearse this opening. So it was timed. It was timed to the music. It was timed to everything. I mean, it was perfect. And the camera guy pans down and shows the shoes to the director, and so tells the director, hey, check out these guys' shoes. While he's calling all his other shots, doing all his other timings, he goes, we're coming to you 10 seconds early, start low, and we cut early so we can get them walking in. And then he's like, bring these lights down. Don't bring these lights up until I call. He changed everything just to make that shot. That is amazing to me because it's all improv, and it's not improv of, one little thing. It was the whole production moving to get that one shot, and it's a beautiful shot. the fact that they can do that and they do this type of thing all the time really makes them the best.
So one detail that I myself didn't know when I worked on the first season of ELEAGUE, and I'm sure lots of people will not be aware of, is when you describe now working on all these ELEAGUE events, like how much time goes into it, you are not an employee of ELEAGUE. You do it as a freelance contract, just like I do essentially. You get hired, you want to do this event, yes, here's the terms, I agree, sign the contract, and you just come for when ELEAGUE's on, right? When ELEAGUE's not on, Alchemist could be producing any Counter-Strike tournament.
Any game, actually. I think I can do any game. I didn't do Street Fighter, so did Overwatch, I did Counter-Strike, and then nothing. I've talked to esports has no shortage of scams. They have no shortage of people with bad ideas. I've talked to lots of them. But I ain't doing it. I'm not an idiot. And I've talked to some other events about the calendar between the major and the summer was pretty much booked already. So I haven't really got too much, but I've talked to a few people. Anytime I watch a video game, the first thing I think of is how to broadcast it. I mean, Overwatch, I think we've done better than anybody else. I know how to broadcast Overwatch. It needs a lot of help, but I know how to do it. That public battle.
What are some of the main things do you think that are tough with Overwatch? Because obviously everyone was figuring that out at the beginning, right?
Yeah. Some of it. Let's go back to our Counter-Strike rules. We want to show the attacking team moving towards their goal, and then in the right situation, you show the defense. Explaining the right situation is a little tough in Overwatch, but it's there and it can be done. Showing, Apex, and I don't mean to bash on them, but they do a lot of, they show the flankers, the one guy going out in the middle of nowhere fighting one other person. Who cares? They'll switch from first person from a red team to the blue team, sometimes the exact same character. And the UI is not intuitive enough to do that. So, I mean, that's just one of our rules was if you're on the red team and you're going to go to somebody on the blue team, you go to an overview shot first, then go to the other team. You never cut immediately. You go with the attack, you show the setup, you go to the other team. And to me, that's the basics of it. It gets complex down to the character of, this character you never want to show because when he looks at his teammates, he has a red outline on him, but he's on the blue team because the UI isn't there. So I think games like, was that Battlegrounds game? Was it Player Unknown Battlegrounds? In my brain, I know how to produce that as a show live. But it's not cheap. But it's like one of those, I hope one day somebody will come to me and say, hey, Jason, how would you do this?
Okay. So you still okay. And that's the good question then. If you had the choice, you can do a lot of the other Counter-Strike tournaments too. You can do like events in Europe, events wherever they might be, or are you specifically trying to do ambitious things? Is it where do you fall on that spectrum?
Probably a problem with me is I never wanted to get rich in esports. I just like to do the work. I just like to tell the story. So my ambition is I'll do whatever it takes to tell a story. If I have a choice between doing ELEAGUE and something else, I'm going to pick ELEAGUE 90% of the time. I like the product. I like the people. I like how things run there. I know working with anybody else, it's not going to be that level of production. But then there's the trade-off of if I worked with an MLG on something, everybody knows esports. Everybody knows what you're talking about. So, I mean, I look forward to the challenge of doing something new. So if somebody wanted me to, I've sent Blizzard mock-ups of the UI for Overwatch for free because it actually makes me angry to look at this UI like this. So I don't know if I have an answer to that question. If the right offer comes along, I'll do it. And I'd work with DreamHack if they asked me. I'd work with ESL if they asked me. People like to bash on ESL, and it's like, what ESL does is different. The level that they travel across the country. If you knew how many problems ELEAGUE had just going to the Fox from down the street from our studio, to imagine that ESL almost every month is in another country. Should they entertain me more on the broadcast? Yes. Should they fix some of their other problems? Yes. But it's not as bad as, it's not a personal insult to the viewer, which is how I think some people take it. So yeah, I'd work with anyone.
So when you're producing ELEAGUE, and let's just imagine it's the Counter-Strike show for a hypothetical, right?
All right.
What level of responsibility do you actually have, in as much as if one of the people on the show made an incredibly bad joke that was like really politically bad, like, would you be fired? Just asking for a friend.
I've gotten yelled at for comments that we would think that are pretty innocent, and actually probably never from you. So I'm not trying to tell you to up your game. But just like some little comments, I've been like, hey, you can't have that. Or even like a graphic that, had
too risky.
Yeah. And it was like, Jason, you can't do that. I probably could get fired. I just don't think it's going to happen just yet. But the funny thing is like, I'll see on Reddit, like people will flame you for something that you've said. And 5 seconds after you said that, I've hit your earpiece and said, that was great. So it's like there's this double reinforcement of Reddit telling you you're bad and your producer telling you, yeah, give me more of that.
Sure. So in esports, did you ever really follow closely any of the games other than, like you said, you weren't into StarCraft that much? Obviously, Overwatch has just come out and was part of your job. Is there actually like a game out there that you never did back in the day, or you would still like to do that's around now? Is this still something that you'd be interested in going to?
Well, I mean, we did Quake back in the day as well. League, I love the production of League and Dota. I think the game is boring as shit. I don't know if you could pay me to do that. Probably. I would probably take the money, but I think it's boring. No offense to the people who like it. It just doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't tick any boxes. Overwatch, I actually started playing the beta. I got in the beta from some friends in Blizzard, and I wanted to do that immediately because I enjoy playing it so much. It's my main game I play. The new Quake game, I haven't played it yet, but it looks interesting. I like shooters. MOBA style games to me are just not as interesting. RTSs, my problem is when I play those games, I like to watch the units fight, and you can't play like that. You got to constantly be building and moving and building. I like to watch the units fight, so you can't do that in StarCraft. So I'd be really bad at an RTS. Could I do it an RTS show? Yes. Could I tell good stories about the players, about how they won, how to entertain the audience? Yeah, I think I could do that in any game. Fighting games, I was actually looking forward to doing Street Fighter. I was kind of disappointed that I didn't get to do it. There's something very exciting about just 1v1 immediate satisfaction in that game. Would have been nice to do.
So at the end of the interview, do you have a final message or somebody you want to thank or say hello to?
Thanks for having me. Thanks for SirScoots for talking me into bugging people again about work. I am a free agent. besides E-League time, somebody wants me to run your show for you, or figure out how to broadcast your game or what your game needs. I actually, you know what? That to me, that would be almost a really fun thing to go into a new game and set it up to be broadcast. Work with the designers to, like, if Overwatch would have brought me in a year ago to design their UI and how to broadcast that game, oh, that would have been a dream. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for having me. I would say you've hit the bottom of the barrel. First you interviewed yourself, then you interviewed me. Who's left?
Hi, this is Natu, a guy who's way too old and way too long involved in this game, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.